Hello everybody and welcome back to another photo critique. I'm Toby.
And I'm Christina.
And this is a wrap-up of images that were submitted a few weeks ago now, but because of traveling and other video schedules, it didn't get out. And so we're going to just be finishing up some of those images. But before we get to those, I want to give you your next photo assignment. I think this is assignment number 4. Does that sound right, Christina?
It sounds right.
And this is actually a reader-submitted assignment, and it worked so nicely with a recent Think Before You Click video that went out. And so your assignment, folks, you're going to have 2 weeks from today. So these are going to be critiqued on Monday, the 22nd of September, which means they should be in by Sunday, the 21st. Your assignment is to use elements within your composition to naturally frame your subject. This was submitted by Todd Davis. Thank you, Todd. That's a great suggestion. And if you want some more supporting information about framing your subjects and using elements in your composition to do so, go watch my Think Before You Click episode 3, which is all about using elements in your composition to naturally frame your subject. And Eduardo had this great picture last week that I'll throw up right now, or 2 weeks ago now, where the subject isn't a person but a clock face, and here it is, and that's another example. But we're going to be looking for those. We're going to be picking just a couple to talk about, but we want to see lots submitted, and I'll be sharing everybody's submitted images out on the blog as well. So let's get right into our first image that we're critiquing this week. Jacopo has Lonely Tree. I think this is a really nice shot. It's this foggy night. There's some unknowns to it, but in that case, that's okay to me. We've got really nice monochromatic image that has great texture, great contrast, and has great depth to it, which sometimes monochromatic images don't. You lose that depth, but because we got those different shades of tree branches, we can really tell all of the different directions it's going. And we even got hints of the rays of light coming through it. And I think this is a really nice shot.
Yeah, it's really cool.
My only complaint,
the top is cut off
just a little bit. Just a little bit. So I would have given that just a little bit more room. You're at 18 millimeters, so back up just a little bit. Oh, night. So this was a night shot, I guess, and I guess that is the moon.
It's very cool.
It is. Very nicely done, Jacopo. Another black and white. And I think this was the picture you had in mind when you said this is when we mentioned Eduardo's being a complex, a lot of, a busy but a strong subject. And you kind of said this shows you that even a busy image can work when you have a strong subject. And this is an example of, I think we have less of a strong subject here,
or defined
subject, and a very busy image, and it all starts to get a little jumbled and lost.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the scene is pretty cool, and I like that it's almost symmetrical in that the horse's behind is like one side that's sort of paralleled by the carriage itself, but the driver still gets really lost. And I feel like because it's a human element, and again, our brains are just constantly looking for like patterns and to make sense of things, that's what my eye is going to want to go to first. That's what I feel like I should be looking at, but it gets distracted by other things in the photo. So yeah, I will say that, there is a lot of chaos here and not a clear enough subject. In terms of what you could do differently, I think even letting the driver just move forward a little bit into this lighter area that's further back would have helped to isolate him a little bit better. So thinking about where your subject is and how you can use stuff around, not only as, an additional subject in your image, but how can you use it to frame your subject? Thinking about that, I think, or thinking about that more is going to help you create stronger images.
Yep. I agree. And a shallower depth of field may have helped some here to soften the busyness back here, but still that comment of Christina's of letting him move up here into this brighter light would have done a lot to strengthen the image. A lot of neat elements in here that could be captured.
Here's another strange comment that or a strange thing that I just realized. Are there 4 hoofs back here? 4 hooves?
I think that there are, yeah, there should be. There's 2 horses there.
Oh, I see. I didn't realize. Oh, see, I didn't even know.
You didn't realize too. I see the 2 tails.
Got it.
But the 2 butts are right. And that's the other thing is that we kind of start this image off with, or end, depending on which way you're looking at it across.
With the butt.
With butt. Which
is fine. But
yeah, but it's not always the best part of a horse, the butt. I think. I don't know.
In your opinion.
In my opinion. Okay. Also, I take a moment, and Florian, absolutely no disrespect to you or this picture, because I think it is a decent picture, certainly worthy of likes, but its pulse right now is very high, and I've had people comment to me and say, I see these pictures on 500 pics that have really high numbers, and I'm putting my picture up there, and I think my picture's better than everybody else's, and it doesn't, this has a lot to do with your followers and how many people you have on 500 pics that are active viewers and see your image and like it because it's you and it's the image, both. Those 2 things factor in, and so if you don't have a lot of followers on 500 pics, you can put up some spectacular work and not get a very high pulse number. It's not important to anybody except to you, really. It certainly is nice to get that kind of feedback from people. But if you want higher numbers, you're going to have to cultivate a following. And you do that by putting up continually good work and commenting and having discussions with people on 500 pics. Now we got this neat image from David here, they were on a long hike, and his friend sat down to eat some pancakes after he'd cooked everybody else some pancakes, and he captured this shot. This is a really cool shot, and I don't think, David, from your description, you set up anything. Basically, he put the light up on the rock so he could see what he was eating, and just started eating, and the steam and maybe even the warmth off his body, I don't know how chilly it was, kind of created this mist here, or steam, that the light is catching and shining through, and it just really creates a really nice focal point in this image. You got a little bit of dead space over here on the right, but that's just minor, and a little teeny bit soft, and I do think that is from motion blur, since you went all the way down to 1/4 of a second. You're really trying to get enough light in this very dark situation. But you know what? Those things, I'm fine overlooking those things because it's part of the moment, and I think overall this is a really cool, nice image.
Yep, I agree with all of that. It's really a good example of just how you can create a great image with very little resources. Like, all it took was a flashlight at the right angle and the right place to create a really interesting image from a moment that maybe wasn't necessarily that interesting just by looking at it.
Great. Thank you, David. Now we go to another outdoor scene with Everett's star trails in Joshua Tree. Now, for those who don't know, when you take a picture of stars up in the sky, to get them to look like little pinpoints, dots as we see, your shutter speed usually needs to be somewhere in the general vicinity of less than 20 seconds. There's a 500 focal length rule where you basically divide 500 by your focal length. You got to adjust for the crop factor, and that gives you the number of seconds, the maximum number of seconds before those dots will start to turn into little streaks. Obviously, if you leave the shutter open way longer, those streaks get much longer. Now, a lot of star trail pictures you see are actually composites, where somebody took multiple long exposures and then in Photoshop or even special star trail stacking, say that 5 times fast, software, it will combine them into one nice combination. Also really cool is that, because all of the stars rotate around the North Star here in the Northern Hemisphere, you get this circular motion. And that's actually kind of, I guess, a little weirded out. I don't know enough science, but why does it start to curve the other way down there?
That's just the distortion.
Oh, okay. Distortion. So, I think, Everett, you say this is your first attempt at star trails? No. Maybe you had said that to me somewhere. But it's cool. It's, a really great example of star trails. But it's almost too much in the sky. I mean, these guys are just completely covering it. And I think it could be a little bit stronger if we toned down the dimmer ones a little bit, so there was just a little bit more breathing room for the ones that stood out. That's my first comment. My second is this stuff down here in the foreground, especially this little bit's cut off here, doesn't add much to the image. In fact, I think it's distracting. Now, this guy is better, but because it's so bright and so well lit, it's kind of incongruous here in this dark landscape with stars in the sky that we have this well-lit palm tree. And I know it can get tricky in those long exposures. Small amounts of light from all different kinds of sources can just make things seem like daylight. But if that was more of a silhouette, or at least much more dim, I think that would be a stronger image.
Yeah, those are the same things that I was going to say. I really like, I'm in disagreement with you about this sort of pattern out here. I kind of like the motion.
I wasn't, sorry. Yep. I wasn't saying that I thought that took away from the image. I was just wondering why we started to get curve in the other direction over there.
Okay. Well, I really like it. And I really like the stars. I think it's really cool. It almost looks abstract to a point. It's just like so, I don't know, so uniform and, I don't know. I just really like it. And I really like this shape right here. I don't love this or this. I think if it weren't that as bright as it is, it might be better. But I may just take it out altogether. It's just too, it takes up too much of the image, I think. And it's definitely way too bright. But otherwise, I think this is awesome, and this stuff right here is really cool too. I love how it frames the sky, and it's a really nicely done exposure.
Nice. Yep. Thank you, Everett. Marissa's got some apple picking in Michigan, and now I look through these images first, and one of the things that I want to point out to everybody is that I think this is a good example of the fact that there are times where you can use a very wide angle lens to capture a person without making that person look terrible. I have that focal length rule video out, not focal length rule, sorry, how focal length affects perspective, and I really caution people against using wider angle lenses to capture people because it can easily distort their features and give them big heads and things of that sort. But Marissa, you've got I'm going to say it's your daughter or this cute little girl, and she's right in the middle of the frame, and her feet are cute too, those little posts she has going on there, although it looks a little strange to me. And by putting her right there, or almost right in the middle, you avoid any kind of that distortion, and you really capture this orchard around. And I think that's all good. But this could also be done in a much tighter way, I think, and tell much of the same story. So by using a wide angle lens, and this isn't necessarily bad, but almost like she's in a wasteland orchard. There's so much space back until these trees here, those apple trees, and these apple trees over here as well. And so there's ways if you had brought her over really close and framed much closer to one of these to counteract the exaggerated distance effects that wide angle lenses give you, I think could have been good and put her really in all those apples. But as far as this goes right here, I think this is a great, cute little moment. A little girl, cute little dress, holding the apple in the apple orchard.
Well, I disagree with you. I think that, if you're shooting, let's say that this was a portrait session of this girl, you would want to get close-up shots and you would want to get wide-angle shots as well. I do think that the wide angle or the ultra-wide angle definitely affects the scale. Like those trees seem like they're about as tall as the little girl is, and they're definitely not.
But I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I like that you can see her. I mean, there's many ways you could go wrong by using a wide angle lens. As you already pointed out, you could put the subject at the edge of the frame and have them be really distorted. But this was done really well, and she's framed really nicely between those two rows and the sky. And I think this is a really nice photo. It feels a little bit cool to me. I might bring the temperature up just a touch, especially because it seems like the sun's out, and I don't know, would make it feel a little bit more, true to what the scene actually looked like. But otherwise, I think it's a really nice wide angle shot. And who knows? You probably got close-ups of the little girl too near the tree, and you can tell scale better. But I like this.
Great. Thank you, Marissa. And Keat has a fish. Now, the first thing I notice about this the second thing I notice about this is this big rock stuff that is in the foreground, coral or something. And you've mentioned this before, where triangles really capture the viewer's eye. And we've got this defined triangle shape here. Just slightly, just enough out of focus that we can't quite tell what it is, but it's probably some piece of coral or some other thing in the tank. And the fish is so close to it that it's a little distracting. But I think minus that, within the space, the fish is framed quite nicely. Colors are nice, feels a little oversaturated, but these fish can be so bright, and the lighting in these tanks is often terrible, really not great for pictures. The fish is starting to swim away from us, and so the front of it is a little bit less in focus than the back. I don't know. I think this is one of those pictures where you could just kind of, here's this really neat detail within this fish of this kind of changing from the yellow, the magenta to the yellow, and all of the different size spots. And that might be the picture that we're looking for right there. Really kind of crop in and get that detail out of this picture.
Yeah, that's not a terrible idea. That's a pretty good idea. The only thing that I wish more, I don't think the coral on the bottom left is distracting. It is a little bit distracting, but it's not super distracting. I feel like if it were smaller in the frame, it would be really distracting, but it's taking up enough of the frame that it can, it's actually like a visual aid to come back to the fish. But I would give the fish and the coral a little bit more breathing room. They're just way too close. And I know that a lot of the times you can't really control this, or most of the time you have no control over it.
You put your lips up to the tank and say, "Would you back up a little bit, please?"
You could certainly do that. But yeah, this photo is cool. The fish is really cool, but it doesn't really do that much for me personally. I feel like, I don't know, this is one of those situations where I would much rather just really watch and admire the fish than take a picture. But it's definitely cool, and the only thing I would do is just give a little bit more breathing room.
Okay, thanks. And Keat, I do bonus points for having down there scientific name for the fish. I like that. And Michael, you don't have the scientific name for the cardinal. I believe it's Cardinalis cardinalis.
This isn't a very healthy looking cardinal, is it?
Well, this is going to be my first comment. Certain times of the year, certain birds, or I think most birds, go through molting.
Molting, yeah.
And it's about this time of year that many birds do. The fall season, after they're starting to shed their bright spring plumage.
He's got a little seed in his mouth too, right?
Yep, a little sunflower seed. So here's what I love about this picture is these colors of the yellow, the red, and the green, and a kind of a layering too of the rocks, the green, the yellow, and the cardinal across all three of those. I really like that, and really nice and close picture. What 70-300 on the 70D. Michael, I wonder if you cropped it all.
It doesn't seem like it.
Don't think so?
Probably not.
But so framed really nicely within this space. And like the colors, like that there's a seed in the mouth, something's going on, and kind of his pose, all of that is great. The only detracting element really is that, as Christina mentioned, the cardinal looks rough. You know, he's missing feathers up here. It's kind of a roughage plumage down there. That's not something you can control either.
Yeah, I do think too that the cardinal is really isolated from the background, but yeah, we can tell it, we can get a sense of where he is and what the scene is. I feel like this could, you know, you could do without this in the photo, just to make it a little bit cleaner. So this is something that, because the background is so soft, you could Photoshop out pretty easily. But other than that, I mean, the composition's great, and yeah, other than the plumage and the molting, I think it's a really cool capture.
Yep. You mentioned that you were down to, what was your shutter speed? 1/200th of a second, but you've got vibration compensation on that Tamron
And
lens.
notice the aperture; it's 7.1, and you've got a really, really shallow depth of field.
Yeah. Michael, how far away were you? I'd like to know. Probably not terribly far away. But yes, that's a great point, that even at those smaller apertures, you can get great depth of field. Thank you, Michael.
A donkey.
A donkey. First, can we just take a moment and appreciate those ears?
Oh, yeah.
They're pretty cute.
They're adorable.
Yeah.
Stewie. This is a really cute picture, a cute portrait of a donkey. I'm not sure if the donkey's super crazy about having that bandana on his head and the sunglasses, but he's being a really good sport about it.
Donkeys can be really good sports, especially the smaller ones.
Yeah.
You know, I've met a few small donkeys in my time, and they were all incredibly friendly.
But not mules.
Mules can be too. I think they get a bad rap because, well, stubborn as a mule. They can be stubborn. All right, but let's actually critique the image.
All right.
So, a couple things that I think could make this a stronger image is, one of the things we've talked about, and you know, there are all of these different rules in photography, and all of them can be broken, but at times following them can make for a stronger image. And one is, if your subject has eyes, be down on eye level. And so I think if you came down a little bit and we're really kind of shooting this donkey more straight on, you'd get a sense of the donkey looking almost down at you over its sunglasses, and that would kind of pull this the elements of this image together in a stronger fashion.
Well, you'd get a stronger connection with the subject.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for saying succinctly what I was trying to say. And you know, the other thing is we've got one eye, which actually is kind of fun, but we just got a little bit of the whiskers or the eyelashes around the other eye. So I'd like to see, you should have asked Stewie here to adjust his hat, to pull a hoof up there and fix it. And yeah, I think that's it. And the only other thing is, what aperture are we at here? F4. F4 on the 70-200 at 78. This is a great example of backing up and zooming in, because that would compress even more, and of the person in the background, who is pretty clearly defined, would soften them a little bit more and kind of, well, I was going to say remove them from the picture, but it would compress it as well. I think you could probably shoot them tighter right against the shirt if you're a little bit lower, shooting right on, and kind of frame the donkey within the person's shirt.
Yeah, and that hand in the background is really, really distracting to me.
Yeah.
And I think that would really help. There was one of the weddings we photographed recently. There was a guest who decided it would be a good idea to stand behind the bride and groom. I mean, he was like 5 feet away from them, but behind them during the ceremony, and take photos with a tiny point and shoot. And I was, of course, outraged, because how could anybody ever do that? But I used the 70-200 at 200. He was there for a while too, like during the rings.
So helpful.
Yeah, and so I used the 70-200 at 200 for most of those pictures. And looking back on them, I didn't even notice that guy, so I forgot about him. And I was like, oh, right, that guy. And because there's no way I could cut him out. There's no way I could frame those pictures and cut him out. So I went back and looked carefully, and you can still see the guy, but he is way less. He's like hardly noticeable at all because the depth of field is so shallow. So it can be really helpful to zoom in as far as you can to sort of compress the background a little bit and get a shallower depth of field to remove distracting elements.
Great. Thank you for the antidote.
Antidote or anecdote?
Antidote. Antidote to the poison. All right, here we got Dalibor, Yankee Hill, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Yankee Hill neighborhood view from Veterans Park. Well, this is neat because we have, do I need to explain what we have here? We have somebody painting the scene. You're taking a picture of them painting with the scene in place. There was once a long time ago when I was trying to be very creative where I saw a painter, and I worked really hard to try to frame it exactly as the painter was framing it, and then overlay a picture onto their painting. And it was messy. So I think this is a nice scene. You got nice elements here. Things are crisp. Used a nice depth of field to capture everything in good detail, good exposure. From the clouds and the blue sky all the way down in here into the shadows. And I wonder if you did any post-processing to bring those shadows up, because usually things are a little bit darker. That's good.
Yeah, it looks almost HDR-ish to me, but not in like a super, like extreme way.
Mm-hmm. It's also interesting to see how this gentleman here is painting, how different he's painting the clouds.
Yeah, it's probably taken him a couple days, I bet.
Yeah.
I bet he's come back.
Yeah. And also the colors on the buildings too. But he might not be done. He might have just laid down a base or something like that. So my one complaint is, since you've gone ahead and captured this, I'm going to suggest what I was saying at the beginning, and that is to frame this a little bit more in the way that he is, which I believe it ends with this building over here on the right and has a little bit more of this building. I'd be curious to see what a shift like that would look like. And if not that, then this bit here hanging down, we've mentioned this before, when you have trees and bits into the frame that don't have any connection to the ground, are just kind of there, it can detract a little bit from the strength of the image.
Yeah, I usually don't like that, but I think in this picture I don't mind it so much because it's right next to that building, and it just feels like it's kind of adding to the frame. And I'll also say that you did a really good job of framing him in the water. There's like hardly anything intersecting him.
That's a great point.
Yeah, it's just really, really good framing. And it feels like every part of the image, it's taken up, so that the entire space is full, and it's nicely done. So, I think the composition is really great, and I don't know that this image would be a lot better if he, turned the camera angle. I think it's great as is.
Great, thank you, Dalibor. And our last image for this critique from Scott. Now, Scott's been sharing some bits of information about macro on my recent macro video, and it's clear from this that he's got some experience in taking nice macros. So he took this with the 100L and a 36mm extension tube, which does allow you to get some really, as this example clearly shows, nice macro photography, so that you can actually see some of those individual, or not some, but the individual facets in the fly's eye. So I think this is framed really nicely. The fly isn't looking directly into the frame, but it's certainly kind of gazing, flies gaze, in that direction, and you've given them a little bit of space to look into. Depth of field, when you're taking macro shots, is extremely challenging. As others have commented, there are times where you can be shooting at f32 and only part of the insect or subject is in focus. Here you're at f14, and we definitely see that the back of the insect is out of focus. But I think it works really well in this scene. The real subject here is the front of the fly, all of this detail that we have in here, and it kind of fades off back here also with the light. I think that works really well.
Yeah, I keep looking at this picture and I'm like getting a little bit creeped out. Just because, I don't watch flies for that long up, up close.
Yeah.
Its features are certainly pretty creepy and kind of gross. But the image is very, very cool. I love the eyes. The eyes are awesome. And the focus is super sharp. And I love the composition too. And I don't really have that much to add to this image. I agree with pretty much everything you said. The flies looking into the frame, which helps, and it's just a really cool macro.
Yep. I also noticed, that you used the Yongnuo ring flash, which is something I'd like to talk more about in the future. I'd love to hear, Scott, your impressions of that ring flash. I haven't used that one in particular, but that's another big challenge when shooting macro is you're going to these really small apertures. You're usually keeping your shutter speed fast enough to avoid any blurring, and you want to keep your ISO down. So by using a flash, like a ring flash, which gives nice even light all around your subject, you can compensate for that. And the one last thing that really stands out to me, and I think stands out to most people in this, is the red of the eyes. And everything else is kind of this brownish monochrome, not a whole lot of colors going on, and that works really nicely. Nicely done, Scott.
Yeah, very
nice.
Thank you.
Great. Another wonderful image critique. Thank you all for those who have submitted your images. As I mentioned, there will be you have an assignment, naturally framing your subject. Go find a subject, then put them someplace, put it someplace, put the thing someplace where you can use elements within the frame, within the composition, to frame that subject. And we look forward to seeing your images. I'll post on the Facebook page and a reminder in our podcast next week about where you can be putting your assignment images. Thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.